Hi, welcome to Mrs. Thomas's Common Core Math videos. This is lesson number 3. We are multiplying positive and negative numbers using tiles. If you haven't already watched lesson 1 and lesson 2, I highly recommend you do so. It's going to explain what tiles are, how we use them to add and subtract, and how to make your own set of tiles so you can play along at home. All right, before we actually start multiplying, we want to talk about multiplication a little bit. First, the symbology of multiplication. Elementary school, we used an X because it was 3 times 2. So we use this symbol to represent multiplication. This symbol doesn't work well once you get into algebra because we love to use X as a variable. It's a really easy symbol to make. We can make it fast. And when you have variables and times symbols that look the same, everything gets very confusing. So I am not going to use the X to represent multiplication. Either I'm going to use the dot. The dot is a nice transitional symbol. You may have seen the asterisk. That's what you would use actually if you were typing it into a computer or something that wasn't a calculator. Or parentheses. I'm going to use either this one or this one. So if you see the dot, it means 3 times 2. If you see numbers in parentheses next to each other, it means 3 times 2. All right, let's talk about what multiplication actually means. So when we were doing addition with the tiles, we said addition just means combine. It means take all the tiles from one term and all the tiles from the next term and bring them together. Subtraction, we decided was too confusing, we shouldn't use. So subtraction, we changed to adding the opposite. Multiplication, I'm going to use the dot. Multiplication means groups of. Remember that. Groups of, especially this word of. That's also going to help you when we get to word problems. So adding is combining. Subtraction, we're going to take out every time and just change it to adding the opposite. And then every time we have multiplication, we're going to think of groups of. All right, so when I see a problem, 2 times 3, I'm thinking 2 groups of 3. 2 groups of 3. So this is not a 2 and a 3. I have a 3, and I can represent that with 3 ones, but I'm not going to bring out 2 ones because there are no 2 ones here. This is 2 groups, and in each group is 3 ones. So very different than adding with algebra tiles. That number in front is how many groups you need to make, and the number in the back is how many tiles will be in each group and what sign. Since this is 2 groups of positive 3, I made my 2 groups, and inside each group I've got 3 positive tiles. And you can see that altogether that equals 6 because I have 6 tiles altogether. Let's bring in our negatives. So 3 times negative 4. Here I'm using the other way of showing multiplication, the parentheses. It tends to work better when you've got negatives. So 3 times negative 4. Remember, we said times was groups of. 3 groups of negative 4. Here's 1 group, 2 groups, 3 groups. And inside each group, I'm going to put 4 negative tiles because it's a negative 4. We're using the red side or the negative side of our tiles. And we have 1, 2, 3 groups. Inside each group, 4 negative tiles. And so altogether, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 tiles. But what kind of tiles? They're red. Altogether, I have 12 negative tiles. My answer is negative 12. All right, negative 2 times 5. This is a little trickier. The 5 is positive, so I'm going to have groups of positive 5, the number of groups is negative. An easier way to think of this is negative 2 groups of 5. And these mean the same thing. So what I'm going to have is 2 groups. Inside each group, I'm going to have 5 positive tiles. 5 for this one, and 5 for this one. And if you watched video number 2, or lesson number 2, you know that when I have a negative sign, it means take the opposite. I want the opposite of 2 groups of 5. So this gives me 10 tiles. The opposite of 10 positive tiles is 10 negative tiles. So I'm going to flip them all over. And my answer is going to be negative, whoops, let's put it up here, negative 10. So negative 2 times 5 is equal to negative 10. It doesn't matter if the number of groups is negative or if the number is negative, you're going to get a negative answer. Do you see why? If the number in each group is negative, you're going to have negative tiles in each group. If the number of groups is negative, that's just telling you take the opposite. All right, negative 4 times negative 2. So it's the opposite of 4 groups of negative 2. So I'm going to make my 4 groups. Inside each group, I'm going to have 2 negative 1s, and 2 negative 1s, and 2 negative 1s, and 2 negative 1s, right? Because they're 4 groups of negative 2. But it's negative 4 groups, the opposite of 4 groups of negative 2. So because I have this negative sign up front, what I've drawn here is this, 4 groups of negative 2. This negative sign up front says take the opposite of what I have. So I'm going to take the opposite of every tile. Remember, negative just means take the opposite. No. So I'm going to take the opposite of all of these tiles because of this negative up front. And I end up with positives. So that lesson we learned in lesson 2 about a negative negative applies to multiplication as well. So the opposite of 4 groups of negative 2 is positive 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Positive 8. And that's why when you multiply 2 negatives together, you're always going to get a positive number. All right, why don't you give it a try? Here we have 2 times negative 5. See if you can lay it out with the tiles. I know for multiplication, a lot of students just follow the rules. A positive times a negative is always negative. A negative times a negative is always positive. And that's faster and it's fine. But knowing how to lay this out with algebra tiles is going to really help you when it comes to word problems. And it's going to really help you when we do the distributive property later. So if you can, try and lay this one out with algebra tiles to solve it, and then you can use the shortcut later. Pause the video now and try it on your own. All right, negative 2 times negative 5. We've got our 2 groups. Inside each group, we have 5 negative 1s. And so altogether, I've got 10 negative 1s. So 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. All right, another one for you to try on your own. Here we have negative 3 times negative 7. All right, so I've made 3 groups for the 3. Inside each group, I put 7 negative 1s. But this isn't negative 3 times negative 7. This is a positive 3 times negative 7. To make it negative 3, I need the opposite of this. Right? The opposite of 3 groups of negative 7. So I got to flip them all over. So negative 3 times a negative 7 is a positive 21. All right, now we're going from the concrete to the theoretical. Negative 5 times 30. I don't expect you to make 5 groups with 30 tiles in each group. So go ahead and solve it without tiles. See how you do. Negative 5 times 30 is negative 150. All right, last one to try on your own. Negative 15 times negative 3. Negative 15 times negative 3 is 45. I hope you found this helpful and useful. If you are interested in division, please move on to the next video, Lesson 4, Dividing with Positive and Negative Numbers. Thank you for watching.